this is the big take of the day, and we're focusing in on New York because unlike the rest of the cities in the US, unemployment is really being held down. It feels by the lack of us in offices, even though I can't get a city bike anymore down by where I am, and I'm starting to have to queue for my coffee machine here in the office. Not every other office is like that.
That's true, and that's partly why we did the story and why it became a big take. It was a little counterintuitive. A lot of us who work in Midtown, we're starting to feel signs of life, some green shoots of growth coming back, and yet the numbers are pretty atrocious. 7.6% unemployment, nearly double the national rate, 60% of people on subways than pre-COVID. So there's a lot of evidence that the recovery is much slower taking here in New York than other parts of the country, which is always surprising for New Yorkers because we think we're the best at everything, right?
Humble.
What's the why behind that then?
So it really does come down to what we're talking about here. The offices are not quite filling up yet. The occupancy rates are not all the way back to pre-COVID levels, but it's more than that. You've got obviously New York City. Think about what are the industries here: tourism, things like that, where 7% of international travelers are still, it's only a tiny number that are actually coming back. 7% of the economy is based on tourism, and so little of that is back. If we're not in the offices, we're not going to that coffee shop, we're not going to the dry cleaner, we're not, doing the things that sort of people do, and it's really sort of hollowing out the economy. Even in the finance sector, the numbers that our story showed were still about 30,000 jobs below the peak because, a lot of these jobs went away during COVID. They're not really coming back as quickly. Companies are finding ways to do more with less, all of those things. And so when you have hits to almost every important sector in the New York economy, culture, tourism, finance, the mom and pop shops, it just means we're pretty far behind the rest of the country.
Talk to us, Craig, about this growing dichotomy between what's happening with rental income, though, and what's happening with employment, because clearly rents are still going higher at a relatively astronomical pace, depending upon who you talk to and what income range they're in. How is that happening in an environment where the economy is still struggling?
I think the supply of rentals is like microscopic right now. If you're trying to rent an apartment in New York City, they're really just not out there. People are hunkering down, holding on. Obviously, some people left and sublet different things, but yeah, the inventory is just non-existent, and so what happens? Supply and demand, right? The price goes up, and that is actually driving some inflation in the city, which also might suggest, we're doing a little better than we are, but the unemployment is not really coming in underneath it.